Hello everybody, welcome to my training. Today we're going to be learning how to maintain your vinyl records. My name is Brennan Lopez, and let me get started by telling you a little bit about myself. Grew up in New Orleans, so very heavily steeped in music culture down there. I like to listen to all types of music, you name it, I'll listen to it. Metal, rock, hip hop, R&B, jazz, classical, anything, you name it. I've been collecting records for about 2 years now, so I've got a little bit of experience with preserving them and maintaining those. I definitely enjoy the history around music and how it's kind of influenced culture and society that we live in today. And then I also definitely enjoy having the physical ownership and preserving that myself. It just gives me a more close connection to some of the things I care about and some of these artists that I listen to on a regular basis. So why would we buy vinyls in the first place? So for me, the biggest thing directly monetarily supports them. It's one of the best ways to do that is to buy an album directly from an artist on their website, and then they'll get most of that money instead of Spotify or another secondary company. You get unlimited access, so I can play these as much as I want. I don't have to worry about anybody telling me no, taking the license away, or even having to pay recurring subscription fees for the rest of my life to listen to these. I can listen to them whenever I want. So. Like I said earlier, you get to have true ownership and preserve them yourselves, so it just gives you a more tangible connection to the artist itself. You're going to get a better quality with records rather than digital media. They tend to have like a warmer sound and overall better fidelity than listening to digital music. And then you can resell, lend, or trade them. If you actually own the piece of it and actually own it, then you can give it away, you can trade them. And if you're a collector, for me, I love collecting, so it's one of the best things that you can collect, because who doesn't like to listen to music? And then also you get to have a tangible piece with you at all times, so you get to maintain that and keep that for the rest of your life. So some stuff that we're going to need today: you're going to want some anti-static inner sleeves to protect the record itself. You're going to want some regular outer sleeves that are clear plastic. Those just help protect the actual jacket itself. And then we're going to need 3 different types of brushes. We're going to have a stylus brush, and these are specifically for cleaning the stylus on the record player. We're going to need a carbon fiber or goat hair record dry brush, and this is for dry cleaning and getting dust off the record. And then also we have a velvet or microfiber wet brush with a little pad on the inside. So these are for wet cleaning, and we'll get into that in a little bit. If you're going to wet clean, you're going to need a solution, and I would recommend just getting a specific record cleaning solution from a record company that might sell maintaining materials and things like that. And then also you're just going to want to have like a regular household duster, to maintain the area around your record player. And then optional down here, I put record mitts. You'll see an example of those in a second, but those are just mitts that you can use to help handle a record. So first things first, how to handle the records, some do's and don'ts. So we have only handle the record by the outer edges or by the label, and this just prevents you from transferring the oils from your fingers onto the record. And I always wash my hands before I handle them, just to minimize any dust or oil on my hands from getting on the record itself. And then here's an example of those record mitts that you can see, so you can handle them instead of worrying about your fingers. And those are pretty cheap. And then for some don'ts, we never, ever, ever, ever want to touch the playable surface where the grooves are. And that oil from your fingers can help attract dust, and it will stick and it'll stay in there. And then when you play your record, it can ruin and damage your stylus or the record itself. So we never want to remove a record from the spinning table. It just causes room for potential scratches or damage to the record or the player. You can ruin the motor if you hold it back or anything like that. So always let it stop before removing or putting a new record on there. And then try not to ever force them in or out of sleeves. It can help scratch them, so you don't want to do that. And you also want to just help keep the sleeve in good shape so that you don't have to buy more. So for dry cleaning, it's very simple. I always clean them before each play. Even new records, they tend to have little paper fibers from the paper sleeves that they came with. So even brand new records, you'd want to clean them before you play them. So here's kind of the steps to do that. For me, I place it onto the record turntable. I find this the easiest way to kind of clean them, and you don't have to hold it and worry about dropping it while you're cleaning it. You're going to use your dry carbon fiber or goat hair brush, and then you're going to want to turn on the motor to get the record spinning. And we're going to place the brush on the outer portion to start, and we're going to work our way towards the inside. And then once you get to the spindle, you want to run the bristles over that spindle. And the carbon fiber brushes are, electrically conductive, so they'll help remove that static from the record and then dissipate it once you touch the metal spindle. So that just helps keep dust from being attracted to your actual records themselves. You don't want to apply too much pressure here, just a light dusting, let it glide right over the surface, and the brushes do a pretty good job of holding on to any dust that they pick up. And then you just slowly want to move from outside to inside, run over the spindle, and then when you get finished, you can lift it off the record. And if you want to make a few passes, you can, just to be extra sure. And then moving on, we have wet record cleaning. You want to wet record clean about every 50 or so plays. That just helps keep them, in the long term, keep the integrity of the record. Any dust buildup, you want to remove that on a somewhat regular basis. Very similar to the dry cleaning method that we had earlier. We're going to want to place the record onto the turntable. Always dry clean it before you wet clean it. That way you get any large dust particles off of there. And then you're going to use your velvet or microfiber record brush. Here's a different version here, and it's squared. That will come in just a second. So we're going to turn on the motor of the turntable, and then you just want to apply 2 or 3 sprays of record cleaner to your brush. You don't want to oversaturate it. If you oversaturate it, it'll just act like a wet mop and kind of push dust around your record. So you don't want to do that. But we want to put it on the inner portion of the record instead of the outer portion. We're going to go the opposite direction at a 45-degree angle. The 45 is more for square brushes like that. With my round brush here, it's not as big of a deal since it does have a curved surface already. And we're just going to start on the inner portion and move to the outer portion of the record and lift the brush off the record nice and easy, and it should extract most of that dust that's on the inside of there. You do want to allow for some dry time before you play them or re-sleeve them. I mean, most of the record solutions, they evaporate really quickly, so you don't need to wait too long. Just make sure you don't immediately start playing it or immediately re-sleeve it, because there could be moisture that is stuck in there, and then it can cause mold in the long run. So when you're done, you can use your dry brush to just brush off any dust that's on your wet brush, and that kind of helps knock off any of that dust on both of those brushes there. For the stylus, very simple. I always clean my stylus before and after each play. Always just use the specific stylus brush. They have slightly different bristles than the other ones, and you're going to want to move from back to front or the same direction that the record spins on the stylus, and that'll just keep the brush from damaging the actual stylus itself. So very simple there. And then for your turntable, you want to make sure that you always use your dust cover like I have here to prevent any buildup on your record player, and there's a photo of one here. And then you want to dust around and in your actual turntable regularly, because it will get dust. There's no way to really avoid that. But just keep the room clean, try to vacuum, keep it away from dog hair and stuff like that, and just keep it nice and pristine. Next up, we have storage. So we're always going to want to store them vertically. If you stack horizontally, you can cause warping and ring wear, and even vertically, you want to allow for some breathing room. That way, you don't damage the actual outer jacket. If they're crushed together, you're going to get a ring on there, like in this photo here. So we want to prevent that. And then we're going to avoid sunlight, heat, and moisture. So the moisture can cause mold to build up. Sunlight will damage, the coloring on your jackets and can damage the record itself over time. So even if it's in the AC, if it's under a window, it's probably not the best place to keep them. And then heat, obviously, they're vinyl, so they can warp and bend. So keeping them out of heat is always best practice. And then for the actual jackets, we're always going to use outer jackets to protect the artwork there. And those are, you just slide it right in there. It's pretty simple. And then for the inner sleeves, we're always going to use the inner sleeves on the records. And I like to use the rice paper lined sleeves. That way it helps prevent any moisture that potentially could build up there. So moving on, we have the method for kind of how to sleeve a record. It's very simple. I usually remove the record out of the original paper sleeve, and I'll put it on my record player. And I will do a good clean of that and let that sit to the side. And then you're going to want to get an outer jacket, and you're going to want to sleeve the actual jacket and dust cover. And then you always want to gently slide them in. Don't try to force them. These can rip if you push too hard, so try not to do that. And then for the inner sleeve, same thing. Once your record's clean, you want to remove that and place that into your inner sleeve nice and easy. And then this is kind of personal preference. You can place it wherever you want. If there's a gatefold, you can put it in the middle. I tend to like to put it at the back of the record, on the outside facing up. That way I have easy access to it. But you always want to place your outer records, or your records into your outer record sleeve. And then for the summary, we have how to handle them properly. Never touch them with your fingers. Always grab the edges or the label and use clean hands. And then there's also the record mitts if you want to just be extra safe. As for cleaning, you always want to dry clean any new records. Don't use too much pressure with that brush. And for dry cleaning, we're going to go out to in so that we can dissipate the charge on the spindle. And for wet cleaning, we're going to move inside to outside. And make sure you don't oversaturate your brush, because then it can push around dust and debris on there. Sleeving, very simple, self-explanatory. Just make sure the record's clean before you put it in a new sleeve. That way you don't get dust into your new sleeve and now you have a dirty sleeve. And then how to store them. Always store them vertically. Keep them out of sunlight, heat, and moisture, and they'll last basically the rest of your lifetime. So next steps, you can go hunting for your favorite albums. I have like 40 of them down here. So that was the first thing I did, was got all my absolute favorites, and you can knock those out first. That way you have the ones you care about the most first. But then after that, you can try just choosing random records based off of the artwork. And I've actually been pleasantly surprised by doing that. You can actually listen to music that you might not have ever heard before, or find a new artist that might turn into one of your favorites. And nowadays, you can always look for rare or special edition colored vinyls. There's tons of different colors out there. My collection looks like a bunch of rainbows if I laid them all out. So you can always look for those, especially if you want one that might be worth more later on, or just to have a cooler vinyl to look at while it's playing. And then you can also always check at used record stores and vintage and antique stores. Sometimes they'll even have brand new records that haven't even been opened. But when you go to used and vintage stores, you can find pretty good records, even though the jacket's probably not going to be in the best shape. Always double check if you want the record. Look at the record itself, and it might actually be in pretty good shape. I found a couple doing that, and they sound great, and there was nothing wrong with them. The outer jacket was just damaged because how it was kind of stored long term. So, anybody have any questions or feedback? No? Thank you.